It's good to be with you here this evening, and as Mr. Holland said, it's funny, in 1993, my parents moved here. My dad was a pastor, moved to the Oklahoma Conference, and our first house was in Summit Ridge, and we used to come across the street and hang out with some of our friends here at Oklahoma Academy. And then later on, I came and I was a student here at Oklahoma Academy, and we would go on walks across the street over through Summit Ridge. And then I left and went to Ozark Academy, and then Walla Walla University, and then Southern Adventist University. But in between there, I came back to Oklahoma Academy, worked with Messiah's Mansion, as Elder Mr. Holland said, and we used to come and visit our friends who were students and staff here on the campus, and we would go with the school on walks over across the street in Summit Ridge. And then we moved on. We went to pastor at Claremore, and then pastor in Northern California in Healdsburg, and then we moved back this year. And our first house back is in Summit Ridge. And we come across the street and see our friends here at Oklahoma Academy. So we just can't get away, it's a full circle, and at this point in time, it's exciting to learn a new phase, a new aspect of ministry. But I think back really a big part of it started here at Oklahoma Academy. The speech classes here and the speaking practice here were second to none. The experiences I gained here always made me a great speaker, whichever speech class I went to beyond this. The experience leading up in front of worship and church service prepares you for a lot of experiences in life. And the leadership you learn here gives you the opportunity to learn and continue to grow as a leader wherever God may lead. So I'm very thankful for Oklahoma Academy, a school that is still training and equipping missionaries. And we need them now more than ever. I was thinking that as I survey the landscape today, a quote that we heard many times here, you've probably heard it many times, is now more true than ever from what I can see. And as a leader here in this conference, this is what I see we need. The greatest want of the world is the want of men. And of course, that's in the sense of mankind, all men, women, children, everybody. Men who will not be bought or sold. Men who in their inmost souls are true and honest. Men who do not fear to call sin by its right name. Men whose conscience is as true to duty as the needle is to the pole. Men who will stand for the right though the heavens fall. And that's the type of men, women, all ages that Joshua was calling for in our scripture reading today. When he called at the time when he knew his ministry was nearing the end, he called all Israel. He had led them when he was a young man through the wilderness alongside Moses. He had been there seeing them from the Exodus all the way now to the time when they were getting ready to go in. He was one of the spies who went in and saw the giants and said, "We are well able to go and take possession of the land that the Lord has promised us." And now that Joshua the sun was setting on his lifetime, he called everybody together and he said, "Choose you this day whom you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." And that's a choice that everybody has to make for themselves. Occasionally, a music artist really nails it. And surprisingly, a rock star really nailed it in this case. His name was Bob Dylan, and he said in one of his well-known songs, "You Got to Serve Somebody," "You may be the ambassador to England or France. You may like to gamble. You may like to dance. You may be the heavyweight champion of the world. You may be a socialite with a long string of pearls. But you've got to serve somebody. Yes, indeed, you've got to serve somebody. Well, it may be the devil, or it may be the Lord, but you've got to serve somebody." Now, they say the backstory to this song is that Bob Dylan, who was at the pinnacle of his career as a literal rock star, was on tour, and he had everything being thrown at him. Fame, he had parties, and he was intoxicated with the alcohol, with the drugs, with the lifestyle of a rock star, and he was on tour, but there was something inside of him that was, he felt like something was missing in his life. Every night when he would get off the stage and the applause would end and the lights would go out and he would be alone in his hotel room, he would sense this empty void inside of his life that no matter what he tried, what he did, how much money came in, it just was not filled. It wasn't enough. It wasn't satisfied. And so after this tour, this highlight of a tour, he was nearing the end. He was leaving the stage, and they say that a young lady threw a silver cross up onto the stage. And as he was walking off, he said something compelled him to pick up that cross and put it in his pocket, walked off the stage, went to his hotel room, and there again, as there was bottles of alcohol laying all around, he was alone in his room, just the silence of his own thoughts. He looked over on the nightstand beside his bed, and he reached for that little silver cross. And what he didn't realize in that moment, he was responding to the longing of his heart and reaching out for something that could fill the void. He didn't know how to put it in words. He didn't know exactly what he was doing. But as he reached for the cross, he said there was something inside of him that was reaching out after God. And he said that night as he sensed this guilt, this shame, all of this emptiness weighing down on his life, in his soul, he reached out for God and he said a little prayer, and he said it was as if God's presence filled that room. And he felt God's peace come into his life, and he said his life began to change that night in the hotel room. And he went back and he did what very few rock artists would ever do. He did what many told him would be a terrible decision. In fact, it was a terrible decision. He went home, and his next 3 albums that he wrote were Christian albums. And the themes were, he was starting from where he was at, coming from the mind of a secular Jew and a rock star, and he began to read the Bible and put the lyrics of the Bible into his songs. And that's where, from one of those albums, came these words. You might be a rock star prancing on the stage and so on, but you're going to have to serve somebody. He lost a lot of money. He lost a lot of friends. He lost a lot of opportunities because he decided that he was going to choose to follow the Lord as he understood it at that time. But he decided to pick a side and serve somebody. And they say that his influence made an impact on many people who were working with him, who went on to give their lives to the Lord as well. It was an echo of those words from Joshua, choose you this day whom you will serve, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Joshua is saying, pick a side, any side, just not both sides, but I know where I stand. I choose the side of the Lord, me and my entire house. He tells them in that same saying in our scripture reading today to put away the gods that are on the other side of the river. You see, many of the Israelites who had wandered 40 years in the wilderness and who came to the land, they said, yeah, I want to serve the Lord because he's given us manna from heaven, he's given us water from a rock, he's led us across the Jordan River, he's now given us cities and vineyards and all these things. But I also really think that God from the person who used to live in this city is kind of a novel thought too. And Israel struggles with this, and we think, how could they struggle with these little stone figurines of God and wooden carvings of Astarte and Asherah and Baal and Dagon and Mot and Moloch? How could they struggle to simply go back and bow down to an idol? But the more I look at what those idols were representing and why they were struggling with those idols, the more I recognize that they haven't gone anywhere. Those idols are the same idols that you and I struggle with today. We just don't have the same little figurine or the same little stone or wood carving that we go to. Because the same gods Americans serve today. A god of that time was called Mammon, and he was the god of wealth. And many today on the mountains of materialism think that if I just buy that next thing on Amazon, or if I just get that next car, or if I just get that next watch or that next piece of fabric, then I will be satisfied. And they've erected statues of status, and they're worshiping wealth today. It's the same God, different form. There was the goddess Aphrodite, also known as Venus. Venus. She was the goddess of sexual lust and promiscuity. And I'll tell you, the fields of fornication today, many are bowing down at their altars. Multi-billion-dollar industries have built in honor of that goddess. And every day, millions of people are worshiping her with the tap of a finger on their cell phone or a click of a mouse on their computer. There was the god Bacchus, and this was the god of pleasure, drunkenness, drugs, debauchery. There's a lot of people still worshiping in the party scene today at the altars of Bacchus. Mars was the god of war, the god of hatred, the god of bloodlust, the god of revenge. And people today are still waging wars as they put engravings on bullets and fire them. As they go into foreign lands to take occupation, many are still worshiping at the altars of Mars today. There was the goddess Sophia. She was the goddess of wisdom. And many today are still serving and substituting a thus saith man for thus saith the word of the Lord. But when we get back to what Joshua was calling us to, it's called consecration. It's to stop straddling the fence, stop trying to say, I want to go to heaven and pick a never-fading flower and all of that. But you know what? What I see everyone doing on Instagram sure looks pretty good too. And I kind of want both. Stop trying to straddle the fence. Devote yourself instead. Dedicate yourself to a special purpose. But consecration requires you to make a decision. It requires you to choose this day whom you will serve. It requires you to stop equivocating, stop vacillating, stop straddling the fence, and make an entire commitment of your life. This is who I'm going to stand for. I'm going to pick the Lord's side, and I'm going to serve Him. In Steps to Christ, it says, and this is what I struggled with for a long time. I wanted to be a Christian, but I also wanted to fit in with my friends. I wanted to be on the Lord's side and do what I thought was right, but I also didn't want to be left out of what everyone else was doing. And I struggled with this, and I didn't go anywhere in my Christian experience for many years because what Steps to Christ says is the whole heart must be yielded to God, or the change can never be wrought in us by which we are restored to His likeness. I used to struggle with a sentence in Steps to Christ that said, many will be lost while hoping and desiring to be Christians. I thought, how is that? I want to be a Christian. I want to go to heaven. But many will be lost while hoping and desiring to be. And I thought, how could that be? And I think this is what it comes down to right here. God cannot do anything in your life until your whole heart is yielded over to Him. He can't produce the change in you. He can't really make you into His likeness until you stop saying, here's my heart, God, can you work on? Oh, but wait, let me work. Okay, here you go ahead and work on it. Okay, no, wait, actually, I want to put it this way. Okay, here you go, you can work. God can't do anything in your life until we say, God, here's the whole heart. Here's all of the decisions that I could possibly make. I'm going to give it to you, and you mold me, you shape me, you turn me into what you created me to be in the beginning, and I'm not going to take it back from you. I'm going to give it to you, and you turn me into the person that you wanted me to be. I thought for a lot of my life that I was serving myself when I was doing the things I wanted to do. But I realized in hindsight that I was, like Bob Dylan said, serving somebody. Well, it may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but it's somebody. And I remember one night sitting in my room in Walla Walla University where I was attending, a school so nice they had to name it twice, Walla Walla. I remember sitting there in the room, and I remember thinking to myself, how did I get here? The smoke people were blowing was swirling around in the room, alcohol bottles open in my friends' hands. Friday night. All the good Christians were at home having Vespers. There I was in this room with my friends, having a little party. And then I remember thinking to myself, as I looked around and I saw the faces, how did I get here? this isn't how I imagined my life turning out. I had dropped out of school earlier that year. I wasn't quite sure which direction I was going in. I had actually applied to work at Washington State Penitentiary, which was you got the high school or the college, and you got the penitentiary, which is the main industry in the town, and it's an interesting dynamic there. And I was hired at Washington State Penitentiary as a correctional officer. And I remember walking into a world that was sort of like the dark side that I had never been into before, and it was eye-opening to see the choices that these men made when they were young and to see the end result of where they ended up as they had picked which route they were going to go down. And I remember in the penitentiary as I was working there thinking like, I'm making a lot of money, which I thought was going to make me happy. And I remember having a lot of parties at my house and thinking, well, that's surely going to make me happy. It's going to be fun. There's going to be a lot of friends. I'll be the life of the party. And I remember thinking to myself that as I pieced all of these things together, that it was going to really get me to that place that I thought Oklahoma Academy had been keeping me from for all those years. You know, it's funny. I've been to a lot of academies. Oklahoma Academy, I went to Ardmore Adventist Academy, went to Ozark Academy, and then I worked at several academies and colleges, and it's funny, no matter which campus you go to, no matter how good the food is, there's always somebody who says, the food is awful here. Oh man, for the leeks and onions that I used to eat, for the Beyond Meat burger that I used to get from the fast food restaurant, oh man. Food here is awful. No matter what school you're at, no matter how good the food is, there's always somebody saying that. And no matter how few rules there are, there's always somebody saying, there's too many rules here. Why does there have to be so many rules here? But I found that if you really just focus on the reason why you're there, to learn, to grow, to gain as much skill and knowledge and experience as you can, it doesn't matter how many rules there are there, the cream will rise to the top, and when you get to the next place, you'll be better prepared for what's the next step in your future. I used to think those same things when I was here as a student. Oh, the food could be better. Oh, there's too many rules here. And then there I was, at Washington State Penitentiary, working, Walla Walla University, and all the rules were gone. I made my own rules. And then the party ended. Friends went home, and just like Bob Dylan said, as I was there alone in my hotel room, not my hotel room in this case, it was my house. I was alone in my house. I thought to myself, how did I get here? And why do I still feel so empty? Yeah, it's a cliche. Happens often enough that it's a cliche. And yet one generation comes and one generation goes, and the cycle is repeated over and over. People think, no, it might not have worked for you, but it's going to make me happy. And we think we're making our own choices. We think that we're the one in control of our lives when we're really serving somebody. Maybe the devil, maybe the Lord. But there's no such thing as I'm going to serve myself and myself only. The whole heart must be yielded to God, or the change can never be wrought in us, by which we will be able to be restored into his likeness. Now we do have to struggle with self. Self is the one who's trying to pick the wrong master. Steps of Christ goes on to say the warfare against self is the greatest battle that was ever fought. The yielding of self, the surrendering all to the will of God, requires a struggle. It's hard. Because even Paul said, the good things that I want to do, and I'm like, yes, that's what I'm going to do, and then whoop, how did I end up here? And no, the good things that I want to do, and I'm like, that's it, God, I'm going to do it. And then whoop, how did I end up back over here? It's a struggle in order to, as Paul says, crucify self. But every time the decision comes, okay, there's a fork in the road. I know what God would want me to do, but I know that this is what I want to do, which is really by default choosing Satan. Every time we get there, am I going to surrender my will to God? Like Jesus in the garden, not my will, but your will, Father. I've got a choice, but not my will, but your will. The idol of self is the most difficult one to remove from our lives, is what I found. But after that time in Walla Walla, I got to the point where I'm thankful that there were parents praying for me. I'm thankful that my dad had called his friends on the NAD prayer line and others, and they're like, hey, pray for my son. Pray that some bad things will come into his life that will kind of wake him up to his senses. Not too bad, but bad enough that, pray for some tribulations for my son. Thankful sometimes for parents who pray those sorts of prayers, because it's those bad times that wake us up before we step off the cliff and it's too late. We're like, whoa, I just tripped. Why did I trip? It hurt. Well, there was a cliff if I would have kept going. So I'm thankful for my parents who were praying for those things. And what ended up happening was in just a few months, everything fell apart. I ended up losing my job at the penitentiary. I ended up having a problem in my relationship, and we broke up. I ended up having financial struggles. I ended up getting a ticket that tipped me over the edge, and now there was less money in my bank account than I had to pay because I had spent all my money. And then I remember thinking to myself, like the prodigal son, oh, but there's food on the table at my parents' house. I was sleeping in my car for a week. There's food on the table at my parents' house. And I got in my car, and I drove back to my parents' house, and I discovered that my dad was preparing with his church to go on a mission trip. And I thought to myself, some of the best experiences I've had in my life have been on mission trips. And so I thought to myself, I would really like to go on this trip. We worked it out, got the passport. I went down. Two of my sisters were missionaries in Guyana for about a year, and I went down to where their mission field was. And as we began to backpack down through the jungle trails and deliver medical supplies to different villages, as we worked in the little mission school and helped to teach the kids who were there at the school, and as I was sweating and detoxing, and as there was no internet signal down there in the jungle, so I had no distractions. And as I had to drink a lot of water, and just the nature was desensitizing me from the world I'd been living in for the last few years in Walla Walla, all of a sudden I started hearing the still small voice of God. And I remember one day, tipping point. I knew the way I'd been living that I thought was going to bring joy and fulfillment and satisfaction to my life was emptiness. I knew it. And I didn't want to go back to that. But I knew that if I didn't make a decision here while I was in Guyana, while I felt the conviction on my life, that I would likely go back to the United States and walk right back into the world of how I'd been living. And so one day, when the conviction was strongest, I walked out into the jungle under the trees near a little creek where I would go in the mornings and I would pray under. And I remember just kneeling down at that spot and pouring my heart out to God. It was almost as if I could feel the filth of my sins that was sticking to my life. And as I prayed to God, it was like I was taking those idols that I had filled in my life and I was burying them right there in the jungles of Guyana. And when I was taking all those things and the things that had been important to me for the last few years and I was surrendering them to the Lord, I know that I've really wanted this, but it hasn't brought me any joy. I'm giving this over to you. And one by one as I went through, it was in action. I didn't understand at the time, but I was taking my whole heart and I was giving my whole heart to the Lord. And I was saying, Lord, today I want to bury the past and I want to give the future of my life to you. All the idols and filth that have been in it, and you'll remove it, you'll cleanse it, and you'll take my life, and I want to choose. In fact, I don't just want to choose, I don't just hope to choose, I'm not just desiring to choose, but today I'm choosing to give my life to the Lord and to be on His side, come what may. And I felt a sense of relief in doing that. It wasn't a struggle of what was I going to do in the future. It wasn't weighed down with the guilt of the sins of my past. It was that right now I had the calm, the peace, the joy, that emptiness in my life. There was now a fulfillment that was already filling that spot of my life. I picked a side in the jungles of Guyana. Billy Graham once said, once you have chosen what to do, commit to it. Ride with your team until the wheels fall off. There is no such thing as choosing more than one side. And I remember saying distinctly in the jungle, I said, God, I don't know where you're going to lead me. I don't know what the future is going to look like. But wherever you lead, I'll go. And whatever you ask me to do, I'll do. Because I want the rest of my life to be lived for you. I'll tell you, had no clue where the future would lead. But it's been a journey, and it's been an exciting journey. And there hasn't been a moment in that time when I felt that same void and emptiness in my life. From the time with Messiah's Mansion, learning leadership, the full circle, at that time coming back to Oklahoma Academy and facing the people who I had messed up in front of the most, and then rewriting a new future here as I was now working alongside them with students with Messiah's Mansion. And then moving from there to go to Amazing Facts College of Evangelism, where I met this beautiful young lady in the back over here, Miss Nathan Shires, who, when I turned around in the class and I saw her in the back, the sun was shining in through the window, and all of a sudden there were some birds flapping outside, and angels were singing, and I said, that's the one. It took a few more years before our lives moved to the place where some folks here, we found out tonight, were at our wedding in Northern California. And now my life was complete. I had God in my life, had a wife in my life. Then we added 2 dogs to our life. How much better could it get? Pastoral ministry. We had a whole flock of sheep in our life. And then we went to from the adventures in Claremore and Broken Arrow to the adventures in Northern California and the times back to where Adventism started. There was a pulpit in our church where Ellen White preached at. Can you believe it? I mean, you couldn't get too near it, you couldn't touch it, but Ellen White had preached there one day, once upon a time. I'm just kidding. So, some people were a little more excited than others about how sacred it was. And I said, I mean, it's amazing that she preached there. It's a piece of history, but we don't have sacred cows in our churches. And so that pulpit, it sits there off to the side of the regular pulpit, and I said, we should start giving Adventist history nuggets from that pulpit right there. And just before I left, Adventist history professor did the first one there because he discovered John Harvey Kellogg's brother's grave, which had been lost for a long time, in the cemetery at Healdsburg. It was exciting to learn the Adventist history, to go visit her, Ellen White's house in Elmshaven, to hear the stories of how Healdsburg College was the first college there in California, first Adventist college, and the history. It was very exciting. And then the day in April when I woke up on Sunday morning and I got a call from the Oklahoma Conference constituency session, and actually the nominating committee at the time, and they said, which by the way, I mean, California is 2 hours, it's 2 hours earlier here than there. So I was like, I'd worked hard on Sabbath all day. I think we even had a game night or something that night. And then Sunday morning, I woke up to having like 10 missed calls on my phone. I thought, who is calling me this early on a Sunday morning? So I called back and I had to lay back down in bed for a minute. I said, wait, you're asking me to do what? And they called and asked if I would be the executive secretary here in Oklahoma. And my first question was, what does an executive secretary do? It occurred to me at that moment that I had never thought about that before. What does an executive secretary do? I know that he would be at meetings, and I know he probably would schedule the executive committee agenda and whatnot. So I made some phone calls, and you know what I decided? I felt like I wanted to say no, because the collective age of the new administration, I heard Daniel Ortega was being nominated for president, and I said, okay, he's, just barely in his 40s, and I'm in my, late 30s, and you add up our ages collectively, and it's not even half the age of the former administration. What is Oklahoma thinking? But I remembered back in the jungles of Guyana, I said, Lord, wherever you call me, I'm willing to go. So we prayed, and we felt like we were open to allowing our names to be brought to the constituency session. And here we are, back in Summit Ridge, a nice gated community. That's what I tell people. So where do you live? Well, there's this real nice gated community, idyllic really, just over there east of the city. Summit Ridge, have you heard of it? They're like, what? You're a little young to live there. I said, well, I feel a little young to do everything these days. Executive secretary, Summit Ridge, I don't know. But this is a quotation that I came to at that point in time that I wanted to share with you. And I want you to think about this, because in Guyana, when I was 19 years old, I read this quotation when I made my commitment to follow the Lord wherever he would lead. And I read this, And I tell you, I didn't imagine that the road or the journey would go where it's been. It says this: there is no limit to the usefulness of one who, putting self aside, that's taking aside right there, putting self aside, makes room for the working of the Spirit upon the heart and lives a life wholly consecrated to God. That's the word, consecrated. That means picking aside. There's no limit to what God can do through you at a time in the world where everybody else in your generation says, I don't have time for God. I want the food that God will give. I want the water that God will give. I want to breathe God's air. I want to live in God's body, but I don't want to follow God with my life. I want to live my way. When everybody else in your generation is doing that, what we need more than ever before is a generation who will say, I'm not going to do what everybody else is doing. I recognize that with God, it's limitless. There's no limit to what God can do through my life if I will put myself aside, make room for the working of the Holy Spirit, and live a life wholly consecrated to God. Picking aside. Stop vacillating. Stop at one side, then the other side, then this side, then that side. Stop worrying about what everyone else will think, but living a life wholly consecrated to God. Choose you this day whom you will serve. I want to stop with this right here. Adam Clarke, this great Christian writer, said, as you have promised to reform, you've made a decision. I'm going to live differently. Stop vacillating. I'm going to live on God's side. You've promised to do it. You said, I will do it. Begin instantly the work of reformation. Don't say, I'll do it tomorrow morning when I wake up. That's when I'm going to do it. No, begin now. Joshua said, choose you this day whom you will serve. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when you have time to sit around and plan it out, what it's going to look like, but today, right now. When you've made that decision, he says, start instantly. A man's promise to serve God soon loses its moral hold upon his conscience if he does not instantaneously begin to put it into practice. Right now, tonight, not tomorrow, not during Sabbath school, not during church, not next week when classes start again. Tonight, the grace that enables you to promise to God, I will choose your side, is the same strength and grace which will help you to perform the decision that you've made. The most important three letters in the English language are N-O-W, now. Not later, now. So I want to end tonight simply with an appeal. Every year at Academy campuses, there's students who come here and begin the year with good ambitions. I'm going to do better this year in school. I'm going to, focus on my school more. I'm going to stop being distracted by the boy on the other side or by the girl on the other side. I'm going to not get in trouble with my dean or with my principal. I'm going to do they come in with these ambitions, but oftentimes they don't make the resolution, the decision, the firm commitment. And when you make the commitment, I'm going to start right now. That means if I have something in my room back in the dormitory that I know is coming between me and my relationship with God, I'm going to get up out of this Vespers, I'm going to go back to my room and I'm going to get rid of it. If I know there's something that God has been pricking my heart that I haven't fully given over to him, and he's telling me, you got to give that over to me. I'm not going to wait until some other day when it's more convenient. I'm going to do it right now, today. Make the decision to commit to God's side, come what may. Take the action of the first thing that God tells you he's calling you to act on right now. Get rid of something, add something. Get rid of a distraction, add a devotional time. Whatever it is, and start right now, tonight, come what may. When you make that decision, and then tomorrow repeat that decision, and then the next day repeat that decision, and then pretty soon everyone in the school knows, well, that's what you stand for. That's which side you're on. And then you make a reputation, and you make a character, and you make a lifestyle out of making that decision every day. You never know where God's going to lead you or what he might do through your life could have started right here tonight. So I want to ask that as we close tonight, we kneel down. I want to have a quiet moment with you and the Lord to give you a moment to talk to the Lord. What is he asking you right now? And I invite you to respond to him by making the decision. And when you walk out of here, take the action tonight. Let's kneel for prayer. Before I pray, I want to give you a moment to quietly lose focus on the people around you and just talk to the Lord and ask him what he's asking of you. Father in heaven, today I lift up our eyes to you. We lift up our ears to you. We lift up our hearts to you. You look down and I know you see the potential in each one here. You see the potential to be a character like Daniel and his 3 friends, to influence multiple world empires. You look down and I know you see the potential to be an Esther, to be a voice of deliverance for your people when all the forces of government are turned against them. You look down and I know you see a Ruth, someone who might be coming from a different background than everybody else, but who you will use to help bring new leaders like a David into the world, to help shape future generations, however long it takes until Jesus comes. But Lord, as you see the potential, I know you also see the problems that are holding us back, weighing us down. I pray tonight that as I've simply shared what I've shared, my life is not that interesting. But what you can do is amazing, incredible. And I pray that someone here tonight, many someones here tonight, that you have been working in their life already. You've been speaking, you've been leading them. And this is simply another moment where you are calling them to pick a side, to give their whole hearts to you, to choose you today and to take whatever action you are asking them to take. And I pray that you will give them the grace to make that decision, and the same grace that you give them to make that decision, you will give them to act out that decision today and each day until Jesus comes. This is my prayer tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.